So we're live back with Maura Collins briefly to talk about a proposal that's on our website on municipal energy code language. There was some language in the House bill related to housing. We have not put any in ours. And Maura's been working to get something that meets sort of the questions and needs that I've raised about trying to push our, energy future forward, but make sure we're not harming low income people and middle income housing. Maura.
Great, thank you. Maura Collins with Vermont Housing Finance Agency. I did submit some written testimony that's, I think, on your website now. Thank you, Scott. And Senator Hinsdale is exactly right. There is a House bill that Representative Bongartz has going, I'm sure you're aware of. And in that, there has been widespread support to limit the abilities of municipalities from setting their own energy codes. The interest behind this, and VHFA supports that that provision in Representative Bongartz's bill, is because energy codes as well as building codes are very complex documents. They are over 100 pages long. There's a set of codes for residential properties, and then one for commercial properties, and the commercial comes into play for multifamily rental buildings over a certain number of units. So it really is both the RBs, the residential building energy standards, and the CBs, the commercial energy building standards, that both come into play when it comes to housing. And every 3 years or so, the state goes through a very comprehensive process to update these energy standards. And by statute, the state is required to consider the lifetime impact of the energy measures and look at that full life cycle cost and environmental benefit. Builders and housers and the public needs to be actively engaged by the state. It's a very collaborative process that's actually going on right now. We're in the rulemaking time right now for the RBs and CBs. And there are, it needs to be determined, the state has to determine that the RBs and CBs are cost effective and affordable from the consumer's perspective, because no one knows better than legislators the continual trade-offs you all have to consider when setting statute. And we know that sometimes in our desire and desperate need for humanity to meet these energy goals, that sometimes there are cost implications that we have to factor. And you all are in the tough seat of balancing these efforts and initiatives. And so the state is going through that process right now. Again, I can't speak enough to the complexity of this. I was speaking with someone associated with the Home Builders and Remodelers Association in Vermont, and there's just, they would have so much testimony that I know you don't have time for, but they would love to speak about the fact that when you set different standards, it requires different materials, and by requiring different materials, you now require different like screws and fasteners, and so you have to have special fasteners like screws. That means you may need a different kind of screwdriver. That means contractors have to have 2 sets of tools, sometimes be trained in how to install and do all this. It is not, energy codes are very complex, and the implementation of them are very complex. And so it is concerning to think that a municipality may be able to set its own energy standards without the kind of public conversation and weighing of public policy goals and implementation impacts in a public way. And so VHFA stands by Representative Bongartz's language that the state's energy codes, knowing that we have a stretch code already and allowing for municipalities to require going up to that stretch code, we think that that is the best way forward, and that municipalities because these stretch codes are above and beyond the regular standards, that is where municipalities should be limited, because we don't know that they all, volunteer energy committees don't all across the state have the capability to realize what they're asking for when setting different energy standards. We have heard from you, Chair Rom Hinsdale, and that there's some concern that that environmentalists have, and that municipalities want this ability to do this. And so I'm suggesting a compromise language where it speaks to that if municipalities were to enact their own energy codes for residential and or commercial that affects residences, that they would have to follow the same process that the state does, which means they'd have to ensure that what they do is consistent with the state's energy policy, consistent with the state's housing policy, be evaluated relative to the technical applicability and reliability, and also consider if it's cost effective and affordable from the consumer's perspective. And that a municipality should have to rise to the same standards as the state when they're saying their codes, and that that the public service department would have to sign off that the municipality did this. And additionally, that this should only be applied to homes that are large, because smaller homes are by nature of their small size. Actually, I think you were just talking about this with some testimony. They are naturally efficient anyway. And so that municipalities should really, if they're going to go for these unique energy standards, that it should only be for large homes, and that smaller housing units, which would probably mean most of our rentals and very modest homeownership homes, that they would be excluded from this, because by nature of their small condensed size, they are naturally come with more efficiencies. I'd be happy to ask.
So Maura, yeah, I mean, I feel like the document really stands on its own. And I think we'll just have to mull it over and get back to your questions. I'm really glad you didn't drive down today. I do want to really, I don't want to shortchange Weiwei because we will not have a full half hour. So I just want to.
I'm good. You will see me next week. We can talk more then.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, we're going to see you probably every other day. It feels like.
But thank you for this.
You.
Yeah,
it's very helpful. I very appreciate it. Very, very appreciate it. Thanks. Thanks, Maura. Wayne, do we have you? Yay.
I am here.
Hi, Wei. So we have one new senator on the committee. We had a lot of testimony from you as you were helping a lot of people of color and people of color like businesses and enterprises navigate the pandemic. We deeply appreciate your work. I know we tried to get you some money, and I don't know if it made it to you yet from the last year's budget, but we appreciate the Professionals of Color Network and what you do, and the time you've been taking to understand what we're trying to accomplish on housing and how it intersects with the needs of people of color in the state.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Madam Chair. So good morning, everybody. My name is Weiwei Wong. I am the co-founder and director of operations and development for the Vermont Professionals of Color Network. We are a 501c3 nonprofit operating across the state of Vermont, and our mission is to advance the prosperity for all Black, Indigenous, and people of color in the state by driving a new era of professional mobility, promoting entrepreneurial ventures, and nurturing a powerful professional network. And we believe that systems that support communities of color benefit the entire state. Our goal is to bridge the economic and professional gaps that exist as a result of systemic racism, because prosperity starts with opportunities to climb the economic ladder. And we do this by promoting entrepreneurial ventures, nurturing our communities by creating safe spaces for connections within the community, and through networking, education, and advocacy. Specifically, we work to empower youth, support entrepreneurs, and promote personal and professional development within the community. And we create opportunities for BIPOC communities to grow, build, and pass down generational wealth and generational knowledge of systems that we are currently helping to create. And there's incredible value to the state in supporting BIPOC communities and individuals, given that the state is facing serious long-term demographic challenges. It's the second oldest state in the country, the third least populated, and ranks 49th in population growth. We also have an employment challenge. It is the third hardest place in the country to find skilled labor. And the state has a diversity problem. We are the second whitest in the country. And if we don't want to be the oldest in the country, rank 50th in population growth, be the hardest place in the country to find skilled labor, outcompete Maine for the whitest state in the country again, we have to actively work to retain and recruit young and diverse talent to live, work, and play here in Vermont. And housing is a significant part of that conversation as we as an organization realize as we talk to our network members, our community members, our partners. In general, when we speak to VTPOC network members about why they choose to be and stay in Vermont, they talk about the physical beauty of the state, their ability to have work-life balance. They talk about the incredible opportunities, whether educational or professional, that are available to them, such as like me speaking in front of you today on a Friday at 11 a.m., right? And they talk about the growing community that exists here and their love of giving back to the community because they can, because they're anchored in their community. They want to stay here. And the BIPOC community is contributing in so many ways. Since March of 2020, there has been a growth in the number of BIPOC small businesses. This is anecdotal, but Curtis Reed and his team are working on the BIPOC business census, which I don't know if that has actually come out. Yeah, I apologize for not doing that research beforehand. But according to the Department of Labor, their data shows that there are over 2,000 BIPOC-owned businesses in Vermont, and the number keeps growing, according to our research. And Vermont colleges and universities are also bringing in very talented BIPOC students to the state who could potentially help to fill the workforce gap that Kevin Chu spoke about yesterday. And when we talk with employers, whether in business, nonprofit, municipalities, they talk about wanting to attract BIPOC professionals and workers to their jobs. In Kevin's testimony yesterday, he noted there are 23,000 jobs available across the state, and only 35% of those jobs can be filled by those currently looking for jobs. And that still leaves 15,000 jobs open, right? Which can be filled by attracting people to the state. And we are, as an organization, are working with employers around Vermont to make sure that BIPOC employees have the community and the resources to be successful. And we know that's a priority for the state as well. But the fact is, economically, to reframe Kevin's point yesterday, Vermont needs more BIPOC people and more BIPOC people need Vermont. I'm going to steal that tagline from him.
Yeah, it's great.
And housing, like I said, is a significant part of that conversation, because if we can't retain current BIPOC residents or attract new BIPOC community members, if we don't have the ability to house them once they actually are here, and it is easier to keep people here once they're here, but we need to find them housing. And we are actively losing able-bodied young residents who can participate in the workforce, specifically in the BIPOC community, because of the lack of housing stock. Recently, the city of Winooski told me that 3,000 Nepalese residents moved to Ohio because there was housing available there. They couldn't find housing in this area. And I speak to young professionals who can afford to buy homes and want to buy homes, but there are no homes available for them. Like they are well employed and they can afford to do so. Like, for example, our own project manager, Crystal Sanchez Williams, amazing human, has been actively looking for a house over the last year. She wants to move away from a rental unit in a neighborhood where she doesn't feel safe and the apartment is not reliable. She's looking well outside of Burlington. She doesn't want to live in Burlington. She wants to buy a house outside of Burlington. But there's nothing available. And she shouldn't have to live in a place that compromises her sense of safety, even though she can afford to buy a home, just because there are no homes available right now. And her situation has a direct impact on others who are seeking houses. We also talked to many young BIPOC community members who are able to find jobs but cannot stay because they aren't able to find rental units. A graduate from UVM that I spoke to recently, she had a job once she graduated UVM and had a solid community built here around her, and had many connections, but she had to move because she couldn't find housing. So where Crystal is looking for to buy a house, but has to stay in a rental unit that she doesn't want to be in, this other individual couldn't find housing. And I wonder if, like I said, anecdotally, if individuals like this UVM graduate couldn't find apartments because those who are wanting to buy a house can't buy a house and move out of those rental units that are so precious and few for those individuals who really need it and can't afford to buy a house. So in 2017, older data I know, but 69% of all Vermont households had 2 or fewer people, according to data from the Joint Fiscal Office. Kevin yesterday presented that that wonderful slide about the age distribution of Vermont's population, noting that about 100,000 people are about to reach retirement age. And there might be that assumption that these individuals might retire, move away to warmer climates, but anecdotally, from my point, in talking with community members, a lot of those individuals are choosing to keep their residences in Vermont and to have a second home in warmer climates for the winter months. And then there are also individuals like my father, who's in a 70s, who are planning to permanently stay in Vermont with no plans on leaving. And he lives in South Burlington in a 3-bedroom condo, 2,000 plus square feet, by himself. And he's part of the 69% of the people that I'm talking about on the cusp of retirement, but not planning to move. And that could be a unit that is available for a young family, but is not available because he can't move away because he can't downsize because of current market patterns where homes are getting snatched up so quickly and extremely high prices. And there's just simply no stock. It's too quick for him in his mid-70s to really deal with that. Even if he could sell his home for a great profit. And then when we're talking about attracting people to the state, we're having a lot of people retaining and then also attracting because of housing. Our board chair, Tino, has 2 friends who both went to college in the Burlington area, Champlain College and UVM. They've both made successful careers in Maryland and California, and they're looking to come back to the state to raise their families because they have deep connections to this community. They're both BIPOC identified. And they want to contribute to their communities financially and socially, but they can't do so because they can't find a place to live. Another member of the network shared that his cousin, an experienced nurse, was considering moving to Vermont because they were having environmental devastation in the area that they currently live in. She came to Vermont for an interview, even found a church to attend. But when she started looking at housing, she took a step back and she found that the limited housing and the high price of whatever was available, it was out of her range. So that experience actually caused her to stay in her current place where she's actually putting her family's safety and health, they're not in a safe place because of the environmental devastation. I'm talking about fires, and she has small children. So there is that health cost. There was also another young Black woman who was accepted at a director level position in Chittenden County who was having difficulty finding a place to live. When she did, she waited almost a year for the unit to finish construction. So she was living out of state and remotely working. And over the course of that time, she found another job and she left her position in the state of Vermont, and she didn't move here. So that has economic implications to the state. And then let's talk about environmental impacts. I talked to more and more BIPOC community members who are having to increase their commutes due to inability to find housing where they are working. Last year, a member living in Burlington moved his growing family of 4 to Montpelier because they couldn't find available housing in Chittenden County. He had a desire to stay in Chittenden County because that's where he grew up. That's where his aging parents live. So instead of staying in the same town as his parents, where he had reliable childcare just 3 miles down the road, because that's how far apart they were living at the time, and making sure that his aging parents are safe because he could reliably go and check on his parents on a regular basis. He now had to move 40 miles away, and now he has to find childcare, and now he has to figure out something for his parents who are aging. Additionally, his partner works in Chittenden County and has to commute daily back and forth between their home and Chittenden County. And you could say that she could take the bus, but because of her work schedule, the Link bus doesn't actually work for her. So she's not able to use that resource. There's another member who was living in Orange County at the time and got a job in Southern Vermont. She and her family were trying to find a way to move, but because they couldn't find housing for 5 to 6 months, she had to commute from Northern Vermont all the way to Southern Vermont regularly until they could find a place to live. We also have a new board member, David Tabaruco, who is a finance professional who works in Chittenden County. He graduated from Champlain College, moved away for job opportunities, and wanted to come back to the state. Found a great job. But when he first got back, he was unable to find a house. And he lived apart from his family for quite some time. I remember this was back in last May when I first met him, and he was driving back and forth to see his family and also back and forth from his rental unit outside of Chittenden County. His family has since moved to Vermont, but they're still looking for a house. They're currently renting a space that's too small for them, and they need to find something that's permanent, but there's nothing available. So there's that environmental impact of moving back and forth in and out of counties in order to live in a place where you don't work. And I pulled some figures from On the Map, which is a data source. And one service they provide is information about the inflow and outflow of residents. Data hasn't been updated since 2019, but at that time, 56% of those living in Windsor County lived outside of Windsor County. 34% of those working in Franklin County lived outside of Franklin County. 43% of those working in Washington County lived outside of Washington County. 48% of those working in Windham County lived outside of Windham County. And 33% of those working in Chittenden County lived outside of Chittenden County. So those are figures from your respective counties. And I want to provide those figures because they're pretty high. So for us, increasing the housing stock, it just makes sense. It makes it easier for both single family and multi-unit residences to become available for the incredible BIPOC community that continues to grow here in the state and wants to continue coming into the state to contribute economically. And it supports those who live in the state, who want to stay in the state, supports those who want to move to the state. And so I hope that as you're discussing this bill, to consider the implications on the BIPOC community, the incredible economic, social, and environmental impacts that it has. And I'm happy to take any questions now or happy to communicate with you all at a different time, because I know that you're going to, you're moving on to a different session, but that is my statement for today. And I really appreciate you having me.
Thanks so much, Wei Wei, and apologies for mispronouncing your last name. I know how to pronounce it, so I'm sorry.
Thank you.
We still have about 5 or so minutes for questions. I know I can always start, but do others have?
It's really helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you. Did you have a chance to look at the bill? And if you have any suggestions, let us know. And you can also look at it another time and give it a suggestion.
Yeah, I've taken a look. I mean, there are certain questions that I have, but I was actually watching your discussion about the character piece of the bill, and I really appreciated that conversation because I think, you know, it's so easy to argue the character of residents that has implications on the BIPOC community, right? Because it's very easy to make it a personal issue versus just like, okay, what is the actual character? So I appreciate that conversation that you all had yesterday on that point. I would love to take a deeper look at the bill because I know there are constant changes. And there are certain things, I'm not a housing expert. I divert that to like Maura, who's on the, I fangirl. Maura's amazing. And so I'd like to have more conversations. I did talk to Taylor over at CCRPC. He broke down the House version of the bill, but I want to look at the Senate version that you're working on right now to have a deeper understanding of what is in there. And I would love to come back to the committee to have a discussion about that.
Great. Wait, one piece of the bill that's specific to civil rights and equity is the fair housing discussion in the bill. You know, just that even when there are the few spaces available, you could be facing discrimination and not be able to access that housing. It calls for a new fair housing litigator position, or that's what the Human Rights Commission has asked for this particular bill. And I just wonder if you've heard fair housing concerns from your members. Just they feel like they're not being treated the same way as other people when they go to look at places.
Absolutely. Constantly. Just a week or so ago, you know, I get texts all the time from our members about where can I go to get a resource? And we do get a lot of concerns about housing. And sometimes it even comes up during conversations that are completely unrelated. You know, I talk to business owners about, you know, what are they doing? But then we turn to housing and they're like, well, but I can't state where I'm at because I'm being discriminated, even though I already live in a place, I reliably pay my rent, and yet I'm not able to stay here because my landlord is assuming that I'm doing certain things because of the color of my skin, because of XYZ problem that doesn't actually exist. So that is a huge issue that we hear about all the time. And that's something that I'm happy to dig deeper into and provide testimony on specifically in the future. But yeah, that is something that comes up regularly. And it becomes a safety issue for our members, right? We have had members who have had to move out of a community because of safety, whether it's, you know, the place of residence itself or because of the folks who live in the community and are opposed to them living there. So there are a lot of issues there.
Yeah, I'm thinking of Tabitha Moore, for example, in your last sort of, you know, who's very public about having to leave Rutland County for safety issues, moving to Chittenden County, and in the meantime, looking for a realtor who identified as a person of color. When she would go visit a street, she would see if there was certain insignia, you know, that meant she might not feel safe on the block. I've had another person who left the Hartford Select Board who said she had to pass a Nazi flag to go to the bank, to walk to the bank, and finally left the state. You know, so even when there's limited housing options, people also are trying to see, am I going to be safe in this particular part of Vermont and this neighborhood, this block?
Absolutely. And the safer places, right? There is no housing available. And so, you know, it becomes like, do I stay here or do I not? A lot of people are leaving for that reason. You know, people want to be in beautiful locations. Like one member said, we live in a state park. That is just a fact. Like, it's so beautiful here. And yet, you know, having to live in these locations where we have people who are threatened by their neighbors, threatened by their landlords, threatened by community members. We have children who are being threatened by parents of their fellow student. And so this becomes a huge issue. And so parents are having to make that decision of like, do I stay in this location or not? And so it's really upsetting. And I think those stories don't get brought up enough. And often I have to send people, I try to send people to the Human Rights Commission, but to your point, like they only have so many resources at this point. So I think it would be really important to have that position available specifically to support the BIPOC community when it comes to fair housing.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much. Wait, there's so much more I feel like we could talk about.
Sure.
We're very cognizant of, the racial homeownership gap and a lot of these issues as we move forward. I have Color of Law on the shelf, and we have a committee member who's listening to it on audiobook on her commute. So
Almost done.
almost done. We
It's a
very
long one.
much appreciate the work that you do and your testimony. And we hope if any resources that we've tried to send your way to continue the work of your organization have been delayed, that they're getting to you finally, because you all have done just such a tremendous job supporting professionals of color in the state and everyone.
Yeah, thank you so much. And if there's anything that I can, any resources I can provide to the committee to support what you're doing right now, please let me know. I'm very happy to do so.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Wei Wei. We really appreciate you being here. You're one of our last witnesses before we just start marking up the bill. And I think that's fitting. So we really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And thank you all. Have a wonderful rest of your day and a great weekend.
Thanks, you
Thank
too.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.
Happy Friday, everybody.